Demonstrators were following me. Reporters and photographers and cameramen were right in front of me. They were walking backward. I was walking toward the opposite corner where I knew that there was another bus stop for another bus line. What allowed me to keep going was the thought that getting to the bus stop meant safety for me. I know it sounds ridiculous now, but that's what I held on to. I was wearing sunglasses because I'm sensitive to bright light, and when the sun is shining, if I don't have sunglasses on, I can't see unless I'm looking down at the ground. While I was walking, people began threatening me. Somebody said, "Get a rope. Let's hang her from the tree." There were all kinds of threats. I did not feel protected. I felt terribly, terribly alone. When I got to the bus stop, 4 local reporters stood behind me at the bench, and they became a human barrier so that people could not attack me from behind. Many, many years later, I saw a photograph of a soldier in that area, an armed soldier in that area. A writer found him 50 years later, and he said that he had been sent by a National Guard officer to see that no physical harm came to me. While I was sitting there, hearing their taunts and threats, 2 white reporters sat with me and talked to me. One even put his arm around my shoulder, trying to comfort me. When he did that, the people became extremely angry that a white person would try to comfort me. A white woman turned and faced the crowd, and she confronted them, and she said that they should be ashamed. Some of them to this day are not ashamed because they were expressing the sentiment of the majority. Now they avoid being identified, and I guess that means that they're ashamed. But they don't think that they did anything wrong. I seem to have been waiting a long time for that bus to come. Eventually I got up and I intended to go to the drugstore across the street. And that woman walked with me. Her name, I later learned, was Grace Lorch. As we approached the drugstore, they locked the door, and we couldn't go in to use the phone. So we went back to the bus stop, sat on the bench again, and waited and waited and waited. While I was waiting, a Negro man came up to me, told me he was L.C. Bates. I recognized him because I had seen his photograph in his newspaper, the State Press. I knew who he was, but I didn't know I didn't know him. And the Queen of No had said that we should never go along with strangers. So I didn't leave with him. Eventually, another Negro student came up to me. He had walked to school from his home, which was within 5 blocks of Central High. He had been turned away. The crowd ignored him and concentrated on me. Terrence Roberts walked up to me and offered to walk home to his house with me. I knew that he lived close by and that eventually I would have to walk by myself. I refused to go with him. because I knew that when I left Terrence's house, I would be out there all by myself with fewer witnesses as to what might happen to me. I was not afraid of the distance to walk to home. I knew very well how to get home walking because I had done so before. My sister and I had used our bus fare sometimes and walked home so that we could buy donuts on the way home. But I was acutely aware that I could be killed. So I did wait for that bus. And when it finally came, I got on the bus, and Mrs. Lorch got on the bus. And some teenage boys tried to get on the bus, and she pushed them away, and the bus driver quickly closed the door, and we left there. There will be times in your life that you know you need your mother. I needed my mother. So I rode the bus to within 2 blocks of the Arkansas School for the Deaf and Blind, who were Negro. That school was 5 blocks from my house. So I knew that I could walk home from there. When I walked into the building, they told me my mother was downstairs in the laundry room. When I got there, her back was to me. If you know someone very, very well, you understand from their body attitude something about what they are feeling. My mother's back was to me, but I knew that she had been praying. She sensed that I was there, and she turned around and we embraced. To this day, I don't know anything about what we might have said to each other. I just knew that I needed my mother, and she was there for me. After a while, I walked home. One of the neighbors told me that my father was driving around trying to find me. He had heard from the radio that I had been injured. People spat on me, but they didn't touch me. So there was not the violence that we were to face inside the school. After we were turned away from the school, we turned to the NAACP, where we knew we could get legal help to get into school eventually, we hoped. The president of the NAACP was Daisy Bates, and she began advising us. We started studying from textbooks that we had, so that while we were out of school, we could try to keep up. The President of the United States was talking to the Arkansas governor, and he was trying to convince him to use the National Guard to preserve peace and good order, as he had said he intended, but not use them to keep us out of school. Through a court case led by the NAACP, the governor was ordered to stop using the National Guard to keep us out. But he could have kept them there to preserve peace and order. Newspapers reported that on that first day, there were about 250 demonstrators. 17 days later, on September 23rd, when we went into school by a side entrance while the demonstrators were down at the opposite end of the street. It took about an hour and a half before students throughout the school learned we were there, and the demonstrators outside learned we were there. There were only police with barricades outside, trying to hold the crowd back. By September 23rd, There were 1,000 people out there. When they learned we were in their school, they became a mob. They started attacking reporters. They could identify them because they were wearing suits and they didn't look like local people. The two men who took the famous picture that endures to this day were dressed like local people. One, Will Counts, took the photograph that made his career. He was a young photographer, had a recent graduate of photojournalism school, and he was using equipment different from the photographers from the big newspapers and the big magazines. They were using those big clunky speed graphic photographs which produced beautiful negatives. But they had slow film. He was using 35 millimeter camera. And so of all the photographers there were only two who got the picture. And that picture was declared by Associated Press at the end of the last century that it was one of the 20 most iconic pictures of the 20th century. And that is because really good photograph journalism shows what is happening in such a way that it does not have to be explained by talking heads. So this is the image that people around the world saw of an ugly reality of the United States. When the mobs found out we were in school, they started attacking reporters that they considered outsiders. One policeman threw down his badge because he didn't want to arrest white people. Meanwhile, in the school, the chief of police had us gathered in the principal's office, and he said that we had to leave for our own protection, that the police could not hold back the crowd much longer, that they were about to overrun the barricades. And so we went down to what I thought was the basement. It was actually the first floor, where there were unmarked cars in the building, and there were policemen in civilian clothes. We were told to stay down in the cars, and the policemen were told to drive fast and not stop for anything. The Little Rock police saved our lives that day. So there were 17 days of uncertainty of when we would go to school, where we would go to school, before the governor was ordered to not use the National Guard to keep us out. And that's when the local police had filled in. And there were other pictures that people around the world saw of this ugly reality of the United States. There were 3 Negro reporters who the crowd thought were decoys. 2 of them ran. 1 refused to run. Alec Wilson had been a Marine. He had fought for this country. He said that he had run before, but he was not going to run this time. So there's a series of pictures of him being kicked, knocked down, people beating him on the head with bricks. This forced President Eisenhower to act, because it was during the time of Cold War, where United States propaganda was trying to combat communist propaganda. When people around the world saw this reality of America, the president